Welcome, friends, to another edition of Wolff Responds. I call this one The Importance of the BRICS. And by that I mean, of course, the new global economic powerhouse comprised of those initials, BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. At the very end of August, they have gathered, most of them, not all, but most, in China to celebrate a meeting of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, which includes a number of BRICS members in China and in Asia, and also to celebrate victory over the Japanese 80 years ago at the end of World War II. But I want to talk to you about the BRICS. And I want you to understand not so much that the BRICS represent a challenge to the United States, which is what the Trump administration and the Biden administration shared as a view, but rather to get us to understand as a nation what the enormous importance of the BRICS has become. And that is as much in reaction to Biden and Trump as for reasons of their own. But I think when I'm done, in the few minutes I will take, will leave you with the impression that you ought to have, that we, you and I, are living through an historic transformation. One economic powerhouse, the center of economic growth and wealth and prosperity, is giving way to another. This has happened many times in European history. It has happened many times in world history. Empires arise and they evolve and then they pass away, giving room to others. And sometimes we haven't had a dominating empire. We don't seem to need one, but we've had them for quite a while. They come and they go. BRICS is the new dominant economic powerhouse center. I'm going to show you that in a moment. The United States and its major allies, the so-called G7, that include beyond the United States, Japan, Canada, Britain, France, Italy, and Germany. They are now fading. They are not the dominant center anymore, and it is highly unlikely. I can't predict the future any more than anyone else can, but from everything I see, it's highly likely this pattern, rise of the BRICS, decline of the G7, is going to change anytime soon. So let's begin. In what sense can I speak of the dominant core economic powerhouse in the world being the BRICS today? And when I finish with the economics, I'll turn to the politics, and then I'll turn to the military. Not because the military is all that important, but it's because that's what frightens the United States and so many people when it needn't. Here we go. The simplest broad measure of economic bigness, economic power, economic strength is something called the GDP, the gross domestic product, the total value of goods and services produced in a year in a country. The United Nations and many others keep track of the GDP year in and year out of all countries. So we know, for example, what the GDP of the United States is, and we know what the GDP of China is. We likewise know, because we can add them up, what the GDP is of the United States and the 6 allies that make up the G7. And we know what the GDP is of China and its allies, namely now the BRICS, BRICS. Here we go, folks. These numbers scream a simple message if you dare listen. If you add up the GDP of the United States and its 6 major allies, the so-called G7, it works out to about 29% of the total output of our planet is accomplished by those 7 countries. We have 195 countries in the world, but those 7 alone do 28% of the world's output. What about China and the BRICS? If you add them all up in the same way, they work out to be producing approximately 34 or 35% of the world's output. So please, simply understand, China and the BRICS are a bigger, larger in terms of output, and therefore richer in terms of product than the G7. That's been true since the year 2020, and the gap between them gets larger each year since 2020, including 2024 and 2025, as I speak to you. But more than that, the GDP, if you break it down, will tell us what has happened to the core manufacturing industry at the base of any economy. And that we all know because you can see it. Industry, which was once something that characterized Western Europe, only and then moved out of Western Europe, which lost much of its industry because it moved to the United States, to Japan, to other parts of the world. Well, it keeps moving. It always did. It always does. And starting in the 1970s, large industrial corporations in the United States, most of them, discovered that they could make more money, become more profitable by doing 3 things in a big way. Number 1, move production out of the United States to China, India, Brazil, other places. Nobody put up a gun to their head. No one forced them. Not the foreign government, which never had the power, nor the American government. They demanded the American government help them move abroad, maintain the military all over the world to make it safe to do business at a great distance. But they went and they set up their factories over there and they closed them here. And we all know which parts of America, New England, the Rust Belt, and large of the parts of the rest of the United States sit empty and idle because those companies made more money. If you were a shareholder, you got a piece of the extra profits, which is why the stock market does real well while the economy is hollowed out. The second thing they did was replace workers with machines, automation. And the third thing they did is bring in cheap immigrants. When you can't make more money by going over there where the cheap labor is, you bring it here. That's what they did. And for the 10% of our people who own the companies of this country, it was wonderful. We've had a stock market boom where they became rich. But the other 90% didn't. And that's most of you. And where did the industry go? To the BRICS, to China above all else, to India, to Brazil. Not only to the BRICS, but largely to the BRICS. They became the new center. No one did that to us. We did it to ourselves, because that's how capitalism works. You want to celebrate capitalism, you want to give it a free rein, you want it to pursue profits, you believe in it. Well, that's what it did. The gift it gives you, and the gift it keeps on giving, is the center of economics moving to the BRICS. Now the politics. The BRICS are where the people of this planet live. If you add up all the populations of all the countries that are members or associates in the BRICS, it's way more than half the people on this planet. The population of the United States is 4.5%. If you add the G7, double it. Be generous, maybe 12%. 12% in the G7, 50 to 60%, if not more, in the BRICS. The two biggest countries on earth, China and India, are meeting in China, working all this out. Politically, it's over. More and more votes in the United Nations are everybody against the United States. It can't even hold on to its own allies half the time in the G7. Many votes are the whole world versus the United States and Israel, or the United States and one or two other tiny politically, we are already isolated. It reflects the economic foundation beneath it, but it's politically kind of obvious. The United States chose to fight a war against Russia in Ukraine, to punish Russia for invading Ukraine in order to protect its border from the encroachment of NATO. Whatever you think of that war, Russia is winning. The United States and the Western Europeans have been losing. That's why the line of where the Russians control is now giving at least a third of Ukraine over to the Russians already. And what happened there was a misunderstanding of the BRICS. Why is that? A political disaster like a lost war? Yeah. Here was the mistake. The Americans thought that they could punish the Russians for invading Ukraine by imposing on them massive sanctions, taking billions of money from them that they had stored in Europe, and refusing to buy the oil and gas, which are crucial exports for the Russian economy. One mistake was made. They didn't understand the BRICS, because here's what Russia did. It said, okay, those sanctions would hurt if we had no way to get around them. Okay, you're not buying our oil and gas would really hurt if we can't find anyone else to sell it to. But they found a way to get around the sanctions, which they've done. And they got a way to find new customers for their oil and gas, which they've done. The BRICS did all of that for them, with them. That's the solidarity you get if you're the core new powerhouse of the world economy. Now, finally, the military. And here's the ironic part of all this. The BRICS are a very diverse collection of countries. It's very easy to see that they have different relationships, one versus the other, with the United States. Some of them are still wrapped up in the Western-dominated global economic system that is shrinking, but is still a big, powerful presence. Some of them are Muslim, some of them are Hindu, some of them are neither, some of them are rich, others are quite poor. I mean, there are lots of disagreements, lots of differences, lots of ways that their unity is fragile. It's relatively new. One of the few things that is holding them together is the relentless hostility and enmity of the United States and Western Europe. It's not at all unusual, and most of you know it, that people who might otherwise be at each other's throats will become good friends if they have a common enemy. The BRICS have a common enemy. Doesn't have to be. The United States didn't have to become the enemy. Western Europe didn't have to. They've chosen to. They don't like a challenge, especially a successful one, to the role they used to have. But you know, the disunity is also an enormous strength. This is a message from the philosopher Hegel, the unity of opposites. The BRICS are threatened by their disunity, their differences, but they are also blessed by that disunity. And I'm going to tell you why. Their disunity means they're not all relying on one of their number to be the military powerhouse. Yes, China is the richest member, and China will eventually overwhelm the others, if that's how they go, by its very size and its productivity. The only conceivable challenge to that might be India, but already India is doing that. But the disunity among them means they all have armies. You see, the unity of Europe, the European Union, never had that level of difference that they had their armies after World War II. They had it earlier, but after World War II, they made a decision they now deeply regret. The United States would take over the military. So today, the United States has a global military, 700 bases around the world to try to enforce its empire. But the rest of the G7 have no military to speak of. Laughable. No one takes the military seriously. They're not a global force. That's not true in the BRICS. China and India have, and Indonesia and other countries also have. So the irony is their disunity means they won't go the way Europe does, because Europe is now in danger of falling apart because it has no military, and the United States is not willing to play the role anymore. That's why the war in Ukraine is going so badly for the West. Bottom line, we are in the presence of a historical shift. The United States has been trying now over 10 years to stop it, to contain it, to pivot to Asia. There's 100 ways it's being said. That's not working for these 10 years. China has become regularly more important economically, more important politically, and more important militarily. Army, Air Force, Navy, all of it. And as I said, the BRICS have military power too. We have to come face to face with where we are historically, and we would be a lot better off sitting down with the BRICS and working out a way we can all live on this planet, because the only thing left for the West to contemplate as this process unfolds is nuclear war, and then the game is over for everyone. And if you rule that out, if you're smart enough to do that, then the next thing is to sit down. Otherwise, you're going to spend your treasure and lose lots of people's lives in a fruitless effort to stop the historical process. The British Empire replaced the Dutch. The American Empire replaced the British. The Chinese or a new multinational will replace the American Empire. Let's work that out peacefully, because the alternative is too horrible to contemplate. You can see, I hope, why I call this the importance of the BRICS. And even though the media coverage of the meetings in China are laughable in the narrow focus on things that don't matter, here is an effort to focus on what really counts here for all of us, not just them, but us as well. If interventions like these strike you as useful, please share this video with others. That's why we make them. And if you have the capacity to help us cover the costs of doing it, please know you can go to our website. Lots of ways to donate. It would be enormously appreciated. Thank you.